What do you do when the HOA president marches into your backyard uninvited, clipboard swinging like a weapon, and declares that your private koi pond and Japanese garden are now community wellness space? You nod politely, sip your coffee, and start recording every word, because some battles aren't won with shouting. They're won with receipts. Serenity Oaks looked like the American dream on a postcard, perfectly trimmed lawns in the exact approved shade of serenity green, white picket fences all painted the same warm ivory, and not a single trash can visible on Tuesdays. The kind of place where people smiled at block parties while quietly judging your mailbox flag. I was Tyler Grant, the quiet IT consultant on the corner lot who'd bought the house after a messy divorce. My only real sin? I kept to myself. That was apparently enough for the neighborhood gossip mill to spin me into the bitter loner who probably hides bodies in that weird backyard pond. They called me antisocial. They whispered I was bringing down property values with my refusal to join the mandatory chili cook-offs. Deborah Langston, president of the Serenity Oaks HOA, blonde bob sharper than her tongue, led the charge. Everyone called her Debbie. But behind closed doors she was the queen of micromanagement. She spoke in that syrupy southern drawl that made every threat sound like sweet tea and sunshine. One bright Saturday morning she showed up at my back gate without knocking, flanked by two board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She wore a pastel cardigan and carried that damn clipboard like it was the Constitution. Tyler. Honey, she cooed, flashing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The board had a unanimous vote last night. We're creating a lovely community wellness path to connect Maple Lane and Oak Drive. Your backyard is the only logical route, such a shame to waste all this open space on one person. For the greater good. Of course. I set my coffee down slowly. The koi were gliding peacefully in the pond I'd spent 2 years building after the divorce. It was the one place that felt like mine. Debbie. That's private property. My deed says so. I'm not granting an easement. Her smile tightened, lips thinning into a straight line. Now, Tyler, don't be difficult. The covenants clearly state that homeowners must cooperate with reasonable community initiatives. This path will increase everyone's quality of life. Think of the children. The seniors. You're being selfish. I almost laughed. Reasonable? Cutting a 6-foot-wide concrete path through my garden and draining half my pond is reasonable? I paid for this land. I maintain it. You don't get to vote away someone else's backyard. She tapped her pen like a judge's gavel. We'll see about that. The board will be issuing a formal notice. And just so you know, continued non-cooperation could result in daily fines. It's all in the bylaws. Dear. She spun on her heel, the other board members trailing like scolded puppies. As she left, she muttered loud enough for me to hear. Some people just hate community spirit. That was the spark. What followed was a masterclass in HOA absurdity. Within a week, the fines started. First $250 for failure to support approved neighborhood enhancement projects. Then another for aesthetic disruption. Apparently my perfectly healthy grass was too vibrant compared to the approved shade. A neighbor I barely knew stopped me at the mailbox and whispered, "Heard you're fighting the path. Debbie's telling everyone you're the reason property values might drop. Says you're turning the neighborhood into a private resort for one." I smiled, nodded, and went inside. But I wasn't just enduring it. I was watching. Every email. Every certified letter. Every passive-aggressive group chat message, I saved it all. Georgia's one-party consent law was my quiet best friend. When Debbie called to check in, I recorded the whole conversation where she sweetly threatened to escalate to code enforcement if I didn't voluntarily allow surveyors. The code enforcement visit came next. An inspector showed up claiming someone reported an unpermitted water feature and possible drainage issues. I walked him through the permits I'd pulled years ago. The engineering stamps. The whole paper trail. He left shaking his head. Looks fine to me. Not sure why they sent me out here. But the rumors kept spreading. At the community pool, people suddenly went quiet when I walked by. Someone left a printed copy of the HOA covenants in my mailbox with the easement section highlighted in aggressive yellow. Debbie posted on the neighborhood Facebook group about certain residents who refused to embrace the spirit of Serenity Oaks without naming me, but everyone knew. I stayed silent. I attended the next few board meetings without speaking. Just observing. Debbie ran them like a courtroom, banging her little wooden gavel and quoting bylaws no one had actually read. She loved the phrase for the children almost as much as she loved finding people for holiday lights going up one day early. What she didn't know was that I'd started digging deeper. As an IT consultant who'd spent years auditing corporate compliance, I knew how to read financials. The HOA's quarterly reports had always looked clean on the surface. But when I requested full transaction logs, something every homeowner had the right to do, small inconsistencies started screaming. Payments to a landscaping company that didn't exist in the county database. Reimbursements for emergency maintenance on Debbie's own property. A suspiciously large line item for consulting fees paid to her nephew's LLC. And then I found the forgery. In the easement proposal packet submitted to the city planning department, there was a resident consent form with what was supposedly my signature. It wasn't mine. The handwriting was close. But the ink. The slight tremor in the loops, anyone who'd ever seen my real signature would spot it. They'd even used it to justify moving forward with condemnation proceedings under a rarely invoked community benefit clause. That was the moment the whisper turned into a roar inside my head. The annual HOA meeting was held in the clubhouse auditorium, fake wood paneling, uncomfortable folding chairs, and a podium that made Debbie feel presidential. The room was packed. People who never came to meetings showed up because the gossip had reached critical mass. Debbie stood at the front in a floral blouse, smiling like a benevolent dictator. Before we get to new business, I want to thank everyone for their continued support of our Wellness Path initiative. It's going to bring us all closer together. I stood up from the back row. The room went still. Actually, Debbie, before you thank anyone, maybe we should talk about the forged signature on the easement application. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Debbie's smile froze. Tyler, this is hardly the time. I walked to the front, laptop in hand, and connected it to the projector. The first slide was the forged consent form blown up next to my real signature from the property deed. See the difference? Someone traced it, badly. And this packet was submitted to the city 2 weeks ago, claiming I voluntarily supported the path. That's not just against the bylaws. That's fraud. Her face flushed crimson. This is outrageous. You're attacking the board because you're selfish. I clicked to the next slide, HOA bank statements with highlighted transfers. Speaking of attacking, care to explain why $82,000 in dues over the last 3 years went to vendors that don't exist? Or why your personal deck renovation last summer was billed under emergency community drainage repairs? I have the invoices. I have the timestamps. I've already forwarded everything to the Georgia Secretary of State's office and the local DA. The room erupted. A retired accountant in the third row stood up. I asked for those records 6 months ago and was told they were unavailable. Debbie. What the hell? Debbie gripped the podium, knuckles white. This is a coordinated smear campaign. Tyler has been nothing but obstructive since he moved in. He hates community. He's the problem here. I smiled for the first time in months. Funny. The state auditor I spoke with yesterday didn't seem to think so. They're opening a full forensic review on Monday. The meeting descended into beautiful chaos. People who had once nodded along to Debbie's speeches were now demanding answers. Board members distanced themselves so fast you could hear the record scratch. Debbie tried to gavel the meeting back to order, but her voice cracked. By the time the sheriff's deputies showed up at her door 3 weeks later, quietly. No sirens. Just a sealed warrant. Half the neighborhood was watching from behind curtains. She stood on her perfectly manicured lawn in a robe and slippers. Hair not yet styled. Clutching that clipboard like a shield. The look on her face when they asked her to step aside so they could seize her home computer wasn't anger anymore. It was the raw panic of someone who finally realized the rules she'd weaponized for years applied to her too. The investigation snowballed. Turns out the Phantom Landscaping Company was a shell account tied to her brother-in-law. The wellness path wasn't just about community spirit, it was supposed to increase the value of properties she and her allies owned on the other side of the proposed route. Classic inside job. Debbie resigned for health reasons before the charges were even filed. The new interim board, led by a no-nonsense retired judge, immediately froze all major projects and opened the books to residents. Fines against me were dropped. The forged documents were withdrawn from the city. My backyard stayed mine. 6 months later. Serenity Oaks looked different. Not on the surface, the lawns were still the right shade of green, but the fear was gone. People actually talked to each other instead of through the neighborhood app. We held a real block party. No clipboard required. I hosted it in my backyard. Kids fed the koi. Neighbors brought food instead of complaints. Debbie took a plea deal, restitution, probation, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in the state. Last I heard, she moved to a condo downtown where the only rules are the ones the building actually enforces. I still sit by the pond most evenings. The water's calm again. Sometimes I think about how close I came to losing this little sanctuary because one woman decided her vision of community mattered more than my deed. The lesson? Rules are important. But when the people enforcing them start believing they're above those same rules, they stop protecting the neighborhood and start building their own little kingdoms. So here's the question I want you to answer honestly in the comments. Was Debbie just an overzealous leader trying to make her neighborhood better, or was she exactly the kind of power-hungry Karen who finally got what was coming to her? And more importantly, who was really in the wrong here?